It's one thing to just speak and guess and read, but it's also really meaningful to have done the work.
We all learned by failing. I mean, let's face it, the biggest teacher is failure.
The power of friendship and community, and this is real time because we are in the same space, and yet you're helping me and I'm helping you, and there's plenty of room in the world for all of us. And I think a lot of times people forget that, and I don't know, they stifle others because they think it's going to affect them or vice versa. So this is real time. I want people to realize that you can lift others up at the same time.
I hate to bring up, because it's several years past now, that time, not to be named, COVID and the pandemic. But I mean, we're still hungry for community. We're still hungry. We are people, and people by nature are community beings. And it is so important that, we also understand that as we go. And we still have work from home and hybrid and things that are kind of getting in the way. And so community right now is more important than ever, not just in business, but really in our personal lives, and finding different ways to do it and create community, whether it is a virtual community or, in person, or, mastermind groups or anything else. Those are so important right now for all of us to be a part of, because it's how we're going to grow together.
I reflect back on this one woman who will be nameless. She came to interview for a role on my team, and she was throwing around buzzwords. And so she said something about NPS, and I decided to dig a little further and ask her about the numbers. Well, clearly, the NPS results that she improved, this is not to poke fun, but to really get educated. And how you get educated is by listening to Sean, myself, and, well, let's talk about this community. So community and the people that are part of it, there's so many you could choose from. Tell me a little bit more about how did you go about choosing who is starting this up with you?
8 partners, including myself right now. We'll probably grow to about a dozen. And what I really was focused on is complementary support. Teams and people that can work together. I mean, who have the same belief you and I do, that we're all going to, improve together, but also that specialize in very different areas. So for instance, for people who come to the community and join and participate, they're not just going to hear, a few people who have very who have very general understanding. We've got someone who lives and breathes journey maps. You with journey orchestration and DoingCXRight in the action side. Myself with data and analytics as a heavier part of my group or my background. We've got culture and CX connection. We've got so many. We got brand. We've got even from a coaching of a career perspective. So we've got folks that help round each other out.
I do believe community is the way that you're able to get lots of voices and insights, because our experiences are all very different. Look how many people talk about burnout, but yet, right, you could take any topic. Every topic's been used and spoken about, but it's the unique angles that where we've all come from that resonate and make it meaningful. I think that for those of us like you and I that have been practitioners, that's where trust is gold in the work we do, because it's one thing to just speak and guess and read, but it's also really meaningful to have done the work.
We all learned by failing. I mean, let's face it, the biggest teacher is failure. It's been trial and error over our careers. And again, going into today, it's still trial and error with what we do. And you're exactly right. Working with others who have the, lack of a better term, maybe the pedigree of doing this work is so important, because not only have they done it well, but they've seen the failure points.
Hello, Sean Albertson. Welcome back to the Doing CX Right show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Stacy.
I'm excited to talk about the topic of community today with you for many reasons, which my audience will get to hear in a moment. But take a moment and share, who are you, Sean? What are you up to these days?
Sure. So, yeah, Sean Albertson, I've been a CX practitioner in a lot of different ways at a lot of different companies and industries, from startups to Fortune 200. And I've always been focused on creating better experiences. Been doing it for 30 years now. If you consider customer service as kind of the early iterations of CX, but I'm now championing a new community that we're going to talk a little bit about. But ultimately, I'm also a professional speaker like you, Stacy, as we both know, and get to share my voice and my information on stages, but also a consultant as well.
Yes, we share so much in common. And I do want to take a moment for people listening. The power of friendship and community. And this is real time because we are in the same space. And yet you're helping me and I'm helping you. And there's plenty of room in the world for all of us. And I think a lot of times people forget that. And I don't know, they stifle others because they think it's going to affect them or vice versa. So this is real time. I want people to realize like you can lift others up at the same time.
Well, I think it's so important. And, I hate to bring up, because it's several years past now, that time, not to be named, COVID and the pandemic. But I mean, we're still hungry for community. We're still hungry. We are people, and people by nature are community beings. And it is so important that, we also understand that as we go. And we still have work from home and hybrid and things that are kind of getting in the way. And so community right now is more important than ever, not just in business, but really in our personal lives, and finding different ways to do it and create community, whether it is a virtual community or, in person, or mastermind groups or anything else. Those are so important right now for all of us to be a part of, because it's how we're going to grow together. And it's only exacerbated by there's so much change happening so fast with AI and everything else. We do have to navigate it together in community as well.
Yeah, the word together is so important and it can't be said enough. I think people are still afraid or competitive. I mean, we both come from the corporate world, so competitive is real. There's only limited spots at the top, but I don't know. I just always took the standpoint of lifting each other and helping each other. And the world we sit in with CX and customer experience, like, how could you not be lifting others up? What gets in the way, your perspective?
Well, I do think part of it is competition. Quoting a few different areas. I mean, the National Speakers Association, which you and I are both a part of, there's this conversation that there's a pie, and it comes from the founders. There's a pie that represents the opportunity for all of us to speak. And you can fight over the pieces of pie or the slices, or you can just make the pie bigger. And in CX, it's even more important. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but CX is at a crossroads. It's both evolving and being destroyed at the same time. And we have to think about it to say, high tide raises all boats. We've got to make sure CX, customer experience, is growing and being more understood by business professionals out there. That is so important, because that's the only way we individually will be successful, if we as a community, as a group, and as a practice really is also growing and increasing and gaining more traction and support.
Yeah. So let's dig into this. CX on the rocks. What does that mean to you? And I'll share my perspective too, but you go first.
Well, so I started CX on the rocks for a couple of reasons. One is customer experience as we know it, I kind of said, is in a little bit of trouble. I like to think of it as the noun of customer experience is really at risk of being destroyed. And what I mean by that is the noun of customer experience being a survey, a specific metric, a department, a role. The physical manifestations of CX are being thrown on their heads because of AI and the way of doing things very differently than we've ever done in the past. But at the same time, the verb of customer experience, is more important than ever. And that's the verb being the customer's experience. The actions they take with business is more important than ever because the data shows that, it's your last experience that determines your loyalty now. You don't average out your support of a company and your loyalty with a company over all of those experiences. No, it's the last experience. And if it's hard, I'm 13 times more likely to be disloyal to that brand going forward if that last experience is hard. So it's more important than ever to really embrace this CX idea. But the community is multifaceted because, yes, it's on the rocks, but I also like to think there's 3 definitions of on the rocks. There is the challenge, a rocky road, as I say, rocky river with rapids and things like that. But then there's also building a foundation on the rocks. The whole parable of building on the sand versus on the rocks. You want a solid foundation. So the community is meant to create that foundation. And third, and maybe, more importantly, on the rocks to say, let's raise a glass on the rocks and celebrate once we've been successful. But that's kind of where we're looking at this opportunity to understand where we are, build a foundation where we need to, and then celebrate the wins as we get them. So, but I am curious for you, when you think about your involvement of CX on the rocks and the opportunity that it represents, what are your thoughts when you tackle that same question?
Yeah. Well, what hits me in my core is that the people that I've worked for and with that have been in CX and customer service departments, they've lost their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painful. These are such good people. Some have quit, but the departments have closed down. And so I, like you, want to help people understand, don't just cut for short-term costs and short-term thinking. It is the long-term benefit. And it's not as, an e-commerce sale, you see right away the cash register.
Right.
But CX doesn't work like that. And so I want to stop that bleeding and stop the organizations that are thinking so short-sighted because, like you said, customer experience is the lasting impression. It is what is going to differentiate brands in this AI world. And I want to stop that cut, that loss. But also we are consumers, mm-hmm. and we feel the frustration when it goes wrong. And that's why CX on the rocks and in where I am of doing CX right, not just talking, but doing it right. I believe a movement is happening, and I'm totally invested like you are.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, too, that this pendulum around customer experience has been swinging for decades now. And we're at a point right now, and it's gone kind of back and forth, where is CX, again, going kind of noun and verb. Is CX kind of a specific department and function? Is it everyone's responsibility? There's a very, very real debate among CX practitioners. We all admit, as practitioners who have titles and histories of being in CX, that it takes everyone to create great experiences. We hands down know that. And some leaders are thinking that way, saying, well, if it's everyone's responsibility, we're just going to kind of fold the CX team and everybody's going to be responsible. But there's this quote, when everyone's responsible, no one's really responsible. And so foundationally, whether we're called CX in our titles going forward, those who analyze, research, understand the customer's experience, and then become change managers or drive organizational transformation, we're the CX leaders of tomorrow, because that's fundamentally, even though how we're doing it might change. And so businesses need to understand that, and even the CX practitioners that are looking for work that I know, that I coach, it's like, take your CX chops to a different department. I was lucky enough. I kind of look back at my career and thought, man, I never really, I didn't have the kind of upward trajectory I thought I wanted because I bounced back and forth. I was in customer service in the contact center. I was doing call center technology. I did marketing. I did product and pricing. I did digital. I even worked in IT and data teams for a while, but all the time fundamentally impacting CX across the organization. So when we think about CX on the rocks, yes, there's a big part of this that's for the CX practitioners, but really it's for anybody in business that wants to understand what it means to do the kind of research around customer experience and make changes at that level. And so we're seeing people, for instance, from marketing, from, IT, a lot of companies are giving their CX to IT because they're like, oh, it's all AI. But they don't understand. They need as much training on CX as anyone else to understand how does that technology fit within the experiences we create. And so for us collectively in customer experience, it's becoming, a broader opportunity, which is why we're welcoming everyone into kind of call yourself a CXer no matter what, because your focus is on understanding, analyzing, and changing the experience for customers because we know that it has that long-term value to the business.
I agree with you, and I'm going to debate you on one thing. So I agree with you that everyone, in my keynotes, I talk about everyone has a customer experience role from CEO to intern. And I do believe that in every department. And like you, I've lived in those different departments. However, what frustrates me is people that are claiming the CX words just for SEO value and not really understanding their accountability. And it's like you can't just claim it for wording and checking boxes. And I see that happening. It frustrates me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I like to say that the four most misunderstood letters in the English alphabet, CX and AI, because everybody is abusing those two letters in the way that they're using them. I got in a huge debate with a company that provides basically call center as a service product, which is, the call routing and the, things like that. And like, oh, this is our CX platform. It's like, no, it is a piece of a CX platform. But to your point, I mean, you and I go to these conferences and we go into the expo hall and it's like CX, AI, CX, AI, CX. About, only maybe about a quarter of them do I agree that they're using the right letters for the right purpose. But everyone is using it to their own interpretation. And that's a fundamental problem. This is why CX as a practice is in trouble right now, because it's been diluted and misused so much that people don't really understand what it means. And again, that's one of the reasons why this community is to help educate everyone in partnership with groups like the CXPA and others. We're all in this together to drive the kind of understanding that says, let's really understand what it means, because it means so much in so many different ways. But I agree with you. There is so much abuse of those letters.
Yeah, that pains me too. I reflect back on this one woman who will be nameless. She came to interview for a role on my team, and she was throwing around buzzwords. And so she said something about NPS, and I decided to dig a little further and ask her about the numbers. Well, clearly, the NPS results that she improved there was no such thing as an NPS score of that. And so I want people listening that this is not to poke fun, but to really get educated. And how you get educated is by listening to Sean, myself, and, well, let's talk about this community. So community and the people that are part of it, there's so many you could choose from. Tell me a little bit more about how did you go about choosing who is starting this up with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 8 partners, including myself right now. We'll probably grow to about a dozen. And what I really was focused on is complementary support. Teams and people that can work together. I mean, who have the same belief you and I do, that we're all going to, improve together, but also that specialize in very different areas. So for instance, for people who come to the community and join and participate, they're not just going to hear, a few people who have very who have very general understanding. We've got someone who lives and breathes journey maps, you with journey orchestration and doing CX right in the action side, myself with data and analytics as a heavier part of my group or my background. We've got culture and CX connection. We've got so many. We got brand. We've got even from a coaching of a career perspective. So we've got folks that help round each other out, because at the end of the day, we're here to help, and we want to make sure that as we help, we have a lot of different people. So as people come to this collective and join, and it's free to join. People can, learn from a lot of different people, and sometimes a little bit of not disagreement, but debate about how things are done, but in a way that takes us all to the next level from that perspective as well. And so I found that people like you, industry leaders, each 25 to 30 years of experience, each with very different, backgrounds and specialties, but all that have great thought leadership and can drive that kind of conversation and connection. And so it's exciting to have you on it, as well as the other members of the team. And like I said, we'll be filling in other spots that maybe we don't have as much strength in as we move forward as well, because we want to be a holistic way that a CXer, as we like to call them, or someone who just wants to learn more about it, can come and learn from a lot of different folks with different perspectives.
What are some of the topics that you think are important people need to know? You've been to many events like me. We've seen the agendas. We're talking. What's resonating from your perspective on what are people hungry for and confused by, but yet it's essential to understand right now?
Yeah. Well, just kind of take through some of the more recent conversations we've had. Of course, AI, AI and automation is a huge topic. And so we're talking about that, and we have a partner who specializes in that shares information, and that's part of his program, that he provides. That is a huge one, because understanding not just what AI is and how it works and what it can do, how do you implement AI across businesses? Because there's a lot of people who are concerned about it, right? There's a lot of employees who are thinking, I'm going to lose my job. So they're scared, or they're even stories of sabotage. So that's one of the topics we talk a lot about. Again, data and analytics, really understanding the metrics, the measures, and in many ways, the new ways to understand through whether it be sentiment or emotion, driven by AI tools, et cetera. We've got contact center. We just had a session recently about the evolution of the contact center from a cost center to a value center. We're in a very real place to drive that change of perspective within organizations, because as we get more efficient through the tools, we're going to be able to double down with even more value in that we go. Those are just a few. Culture, Matt talked earlier this week about, what's your strategy for your culture in CX? Better, faster, or cheaper? So again, great topics and great dialogue about this. And I know you're coming up too about talking about how doing CX right within the program as well, and very actionable steps. So again, there's not just one topic that's so important to understand. It's a culmination of all these topics, because what's unique about today, everything's changing at once. And it's both exciting and scary, but everything is changing all at the same time. But you can't just focus on one area. Like I know you have the same example I do, that folks that we coach and consult with, businesses who are like, I need an AI strategy. They think it's a tech problem. That couldn't be further from the truth. And my specific coaching is, don't have an AI strategy. Have an experience strategy, and then figure out how the tools today can help you get to that experience. It flips it on, in that model, because that's the more important thing. Because here's the reality. if you only focus on what the tech can do today, you're always going to be behind on what your strategy is. If you have a strategy that looks forward around, this is the kind of experience I want, even if the tech can't do it today, it's changing so fast, it might by tomorrow or at least next week. I mean, that's what we're seeing, but it's all being evolved at once. And so it's, we're all drinking from the fire hose. And then again, it goes back to why, how do you do it? You do it in community. You learn and share, because you're not going to get one lesson and know it. It's a constant dialogue.
It is a constant dialogue. And I think that what the community offers, and even a podcast, you're able to consume content the way you need it, the way that works best for you, at the time that works best for you, because so much of it's recorded. So there's so much education. I think listeners have to be mindful that there's actually too much information out there. So go with your trusted sources. And I do believe community is the way that you're able to get lots of voices and insights, because our experiences are all very different. Look how many people talk about burnout, but yet, right, you could take any topic. Every topic's been used and spoken about, but it's the unique angles that where we've all come from that resonate and make it meaningful. So I'm so glad you're creating this space for all of us. I'm glad to be part of it. And I do see a movement happening. I think that for those of us like you and I that have been practitioners, that's where trust is gold in the work we do, because it's one thing to just speak and guess and read, but it's also really meaningful to have done the work.
Yeah. Well, because we all learned by failing. I mean, let's face it, the biggest teacher is failure. And so, yeah, you can't just look at a book or go to a webinar and think, oh, I've learned everything I need to. Well, it's been trial and error over our careers. And again, going into today, it's still trial and error with what we do. And you're exactly right. Working with others who have the, lack of a better term, maybe the pedigree of doing this work is so important, because not only have they done it well, but they've seen the failure points. Again, that's one of the other challenges we see, I think, within the traditional CX is it goes back to your NPS. People are using things the wrong way. And so there's not even, and I know this is very important for the CXPA, Customer Experience Professionals Association, which we're also a part of, to try to show here's the way this stuff needs to be measured, because I see posts all the time of people completely messing up how to do stuff. And I'm like, cringe at it. And so, yeah, you've got to understand that you've got to have that dialogue and you got to have that trust built up.
So as we're coming to the end, I want to give listeners from you and from myself something really actionable. What can they go do besides sign up for the community? But what's something they can do? They're in their workplace and they want to make some small impact, because we know they add up to big impacts. What's a tip?
Yeah. And to your point, go to cxontherocks.com, all one long word, and join. But, I think the biggest things right now is asking the right questions. So for instance, when I talk to business people who say, well, IT is coming and telling me what kind of AI we're going to use. I say, well, ask the question, what are we hoping that will do for the experience of our customers? What's the value for that? Go to finance and saying, hey, do we know what happens with customer lifetime value based on their experiences? One of the most important things is to ask questions rather than tell people we should do something, because you're asking the questions so that they provide an answer. And if they don't have the answer, it gets them thinking. So I've talked to a lot of folks about that. So for instance, IT, a great example from a conference last week, I was talking to someone about their project. They said, yeah, IT was coming and say, we need to do this with our AI chatbot so that we can contain calls. And they asked the question, so what does that do for the customer experience? Well, they get their answer. What does that do for the customer experience who doesn't get their answer? or for the customer? And that gets people, you're not like pointing fingers or whatever. You're just saying, asking in an open hearted way to say, is that what we want the experience to be? Is it more important to keep them locked in, or is it more important to provide the tool that can help certain numbers of them, but for those that can't, get them to somebody in support? Ask the questions, especially by putting your empathy hat on for the customers on, what do they need? And ask the questions in that way, because then the different groups can start to hopefully gain traction in dialogue and say, it seems like we don't know what we want the experience to be in the context of using this technology. Let's talk about that. Let's have a discussion. Let's ask the leadership team if they haven't thought about it that way. And this is where, that value comes in, because the dialogue is more important than anything right now, is to get people thinking and talking about the verb, going back to what I started with. What is the customer's experience? So much of the focus right now, when Matt did the better, faster, cheaper, so much of our focus right now is on cheaper, reduce call volume, making cuts, driving change. That is important from a business standpoint. We won't survive if we don't, if we fiscally can't, represent ourselves, but you can't let that be the only driver. You have to be asking the questions about the experience. What about you? What do you think? What's your big takeaway?
Yeah, big takeaway is not only ask the right questions, but ask them at every interaction, micro moment in that journey. There's a customer journey, how they learn, buy, get, use, pay, and get help at high level. There's an employee journey from onboarding to training and to the exit experience. There's a partner journey. So there's these a whole ecosystem, and really bringing everyone together to map out that journey, design it, and validate it with real customers and employees and partners to make sure what you designed actually meets their real needs. And you could do this back of a napkin to more sophisticated tools. And we don't have time this moment to go into that, but I want people to understand that is a real methodology. And I'll be talking a lot more about that. Last question, though, my favorite question of all the questions, and that is, Sean, if you could go back in time to your younger 20-year-old self based on what you know now that you didn't know then, what would you say? And I'm going to be curious if it's different than a very long time ago when you came on my show.
It may be the same because it's something I think a lot about. I actually don't remember how I answered it last time. So I would go back. Again, this was part of that. I alluded to it a little earlier, and I constantly been thinking about this, especially as I coach other folks. Embrace the lateral. I talk about it in my upcoming book a lot as well, is to say there are learnings and opportunities from moving around. And so the rocks, the obstacles in people's CX career right now might actually be stepping stones to a new future. And the opportunity then to say, embrace this change, because, again, when we think about rivers and rocks in the river, the rocks in the river, they don't stop it. They define it. And so as you're embracing this time, potentially if you are looking for work, or maybe take that opportunity to learn something new, maybe try a different type of role, but bring your CX hat into it and embrace that. Because again, in my own career, I looked at it as a negative. I thought I should be going this way. So this going back and forth in my career, I was a little frustrated with, but I would tell myself now to say, embrace it, learn from it, because it only makes you more valuable down the line. And that's a little bit of that delayed satisfaction, if you will, that unfortunately we all deal with. Sometimes it's hard to wait,
It is. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I'll have all the links in the show notes. And thank you for your friendship and for bringing us all together.
Absolutely. And Stacy, couldn't be more happier that you're bringing DoingCXRight to our collective, and everybody out there should, come join. And I know yours is coming up. So let's join us for that coming up as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.